r/AskReddit. Teachers of Reddit, what is the smartest/most creative way of cheating that you've seen? In high school I was in a computer-based learning program and our science tests were taken digitally. However, they used a program where once you entered the test your entire screen was locked into the test and the only way to exit it was to click the finish button on the test or turn off your computer, which effectively did the same thing. Another feature of the program was that once you were in the test, anything you had in your clipboard, copied text, was not able to be pasted into the answer sections on the test, to prevent the only other way to cheat. However, after creating my own classroom at home, making fake tests, and playing with the program to figure out a way to cheat, I realized that it would allow you to copy things from inside the test and paste them elsewhere in this test. The developers of the program also did not take into account the sign-in screen, where you have to find the test and enter it. Long story short, I could copy my entire page of notes I had taken on the test material, paste it into the section where I would enter my login information, then recopy it, enter the test and paste it again in one of the answer sections, using it to answer every question, and then deleting it before clicking finish. So, not a teacher, but I witnessed probably the biggest cheating related scandal in our high school's history. For context, we had the sweetest old guy as our chemical teacher. He called everyone bud or buddy or ma'am. He always helped. He volunteered to teach driver's ed after school, so kids could learn to drive. He always had a twinkle in his eye, because he genuinely showed love and kindness to everyone. A side effect of this was that he was very trusting. So one day, before finals, he ran to the bathroom during class while everyone was wrapping up their lab reports. While he was gone, someone ran to his desk, found the finals just sitting there, snapped a pic, and then ran back to their desk. Before he got back, somehow, no one tattled. Probably because 90% of our grade level in that class was on board with it. The pictures got texted around, but a few people were smart enough to Bluetooth into each other, so it couldn't be tracked. Well, after the test, everyone had high scores and apparently someone confessed. This resulted in a huge investigation by the assistant principals, school police officer, and faculty. They traced every text message and busted so many people, all except the ones who transferred via Bluetooth. They had to reissue the test. Man, that was crazy. I felt so bad for the teacher. He was really sad someone had taken advantage of him, and I was too. Such a good dude. Edit. Oh hot damn. Thanks for the gold. Edit 2. To clarify, the school didn't trace the messages. They just had 1v1 interviews with the school cop nearby, so kids would feel pressured to snitch. Apparently a few cracked under the pressure, but a fair number got away with it. Edit 3. Also, the cop was our school cop. Real badge, gun, car. He was just there to protect us against school shooters, bombers. He patrolled for loiterers, ran drug searches, ran security for after school events, and pep rallies, etc. So, no actual police force was present, just this guy. I did this once in a college class. Sort of. The class was real analysis and there was one problem that was absolutely going to be #1 on the final exam. It had been #1 for every final exam this professor had ever written, of which he gave us copies to study from, and it was #1 on the study guide for our final. I couldn't do it. I tried and studied and got help, and whatever I did I could not figure out the finer point of this specific type of proof given in this specific context. So I resorted to memorizing the steps and getting it down to a sequence of blanks I could fill in. Exam day comes. I buy 2 blue books that morning, test booklets with lined paper inside. In one of them, I very faintly write the answer to #1, complete with space to fill in the aforementioned blanks. On the front I fill in my name, to differentiate it from the other booklet. When the professor tells us to take out our blue books and trade with the person next to us, I trade my blank blue book. I take the one I'm given and slip it into my backpack. At the same time I slide out my blue book with my calculator and pencil, so it all looked legit. I get my test. #1 doesn't fail. It is exactly as expected. I fill in the blanks and write over my words. I continue on with the exam. And I pass the class. I'm a high school teacher, but this story is about my own high school math teacher playing us and cheating. It was an honors algebra/geometry class, and it was well known that Mr. D reused the same questions every year, just changed the numbers. He made a big deal about making sure we all gave our exam papers back to him after we had looked at our scores and gone over everything together to prevent cheating for the next year. Well, of course, some of my classmates got their hands on a complete set of tests from the previous year. Soon, everyone had a set. Before each exam, we would sit together and make sure we knew how to solve every problem on that test, so we could do it on the real exam with different numbers. Years later, when I became a teacher myself, I saw Mr. D at a funeral. I confessed to him that this is what we used to do. He smirked and said, "Who do you think leaked the test packet to get you to study?" Mr. D had figured out that kids won't study if the teacher suggests it, but if they think they're getting away with something, they totally will. So he managed to get a test packet out and circulating as contraband. Blew my mind. My high school trig professor administered all tests via programs he wrote for our in-class G83 calculators. Basically it was just a simple set of questions and answers that automatically graded you after each question. I quickly realized I could just close the program and inspect the code using the edit function, extract the answers, and give myself a high B or low A, never 100%, as that is a sure way to get caught. He soon realized students were doing this and obfuscated his code to make it much harder to find the answers by simple inspection. It took a little more work, but I was still able to find the answers, and he quickly began to suspect again that students were cheating. Later, he found a way to force the code to self-delete after it was run for the first time. He would start the test for each calculator before passing them out, so if you tried to access the edit, it would be delete itself if you tried to run the program again. I ended up bringing a set of dead batteries of the same brand that he used, accessing the edit, and replacing the batteries with the dead ones, and telling him the calculator died halfway through my test. I think I learned more about software testing than trig that year. Not a teacher, but definitely accused by one of cheating, though I wasn't. I think it's clever, but mods, remove this if necessary. High school, English class. We were reading 4 books in this 2-month period, and then were to have a test on all 4. We had finished reading the first 3, and we are about to start on the last one, when I got sick. Was about 2 weeks. Came back just in time for the test. Multiple choice test, choices at D. Questions were from each of the books, with each letter answer from one of the 4 books. It was fairly easy to figure out the answers from the book I hadn't read by eliminating the answers from the books I had. Was accused of cheating, but the teacher couldn't prove it. We only read the books in class, and I was gone while reading the last book. She never figured out how I answered the questions correctly about the book I never read. Not a teacher, but here are the methods I used back in the day. I wrote formulas on those pens that had rollout calendars. Almost got caught when I accidentally lost my grip and the calendar rolled back in the pen in such a loud way that my classmates looked at me. I also wrote formulas on my clothes and body, the hem of my shirt and the part of my legs that gets covered by a sock. I put a couple of chapters on the notebook app on the old BlackBerry. I did this by hand, which involved me copying straight from the book to my phone. Put answers in the song lyrics in my iPod. But I didn't do this frequently. I forgot why. It was either because my school had cracked down on technology, phones, iPods, laptops, or I just had a hard time scrolling with a click wheel. We'd straight up swap papers. I think I only did it during trig, because during exams we were arranged alphabetically, and I was seated next to this dude who was really good at math. I was afraid of doing this, but the fact that we were so close to each other made it less scary, so I did it. The only time I got caught was when this new teacher noticed that I kept taking out my handkerchief, which had a 1x1 inch piece of paper that had some formulas. In hindsight, if I pulled a bit of sleight of hand I would have never been caught. The funny thing is, the year before, I cheated on a test with 2-letter sized papers. When I was in grad school, I went to a prestigious and large university where a lot of people tried to cheat, and the cheating countermeasures they took were often so elaborate. People would try to tape helpful guides to the back of toilets, or crumple them up and throw them into a trash can so that they could go to the bathroom and get them during the exam. As a result, the bathrooms were inspected and the trash emptied at the start of every exam, and students were accompanied to the bathroom. Hats weren't allowed because students would try writing things on the underside of the brim. You had to watch out for students who had written things on their bodies because they might be shifting in odd ways during the exams. To get a look at them, there were special buildings that were only used for exams, and additional people were there to help proctor. Professors had to submit exams to the school a month in advance, and the school was responsible for securely photocopying and distributing them at the exam. My field, English, wasn't one where cheating was particularly a big problem, but we still had to take all the same precautions of more high stakes fields. Chemistry is a big one because it is often a stumbling block for people trying to get into medical school. Obligatory, not a teacher, but a student. This is for a multiple choice exam. For context, we have uniforms and wear black leather shoes. Toe taps indicate the answer, 1 tap for A, 2 taps for B, and if asking, increments the question number by 1. Heel taps increments the question number by a previously agreed number, usually 5 or 10. Toe slash to indicate you're asking, or when broadcasting means stopping the question number count to indicate the answer, or you lost your count and redo. A double slash sounds like a raising. Then a small kick to the chair in front of you to alert or stop the exchange. This is barely noticeable yet easily heard, as tapping your foot is quite normal. You'll only look nervous. Plus you can mix the toe and heel taps like a beat. A kick makes the chair squeak on the floor and serve as a distraction too. An exchange would go like this. HHTHHTHHTSTTTT, in the easily recognizable pattern of Queen's We Will Rock You, tells the question number is 33, with the answer D separated with a single slash. Anticlimactically, we were caught by our teacher during a mock test, and the first dry run of this code, only because the two guys whose way of cheating was caught ratted us out. So, my dad once helped a friend of his, let's call him Sam, cheat during an exam. Now Sam was miserably failing chemistry in his last year, but he was lucky. They were doing 2 different exams back to back the same day, and to ensure noon was sneaking a peek at their neighbor's papers. They had 1 row to French and 1 row to chemistry. If you finished your first exam, you went to the teacher, handed in your exam, and got the other exam. Now Sam asked the teacher if he could hand out the exams, to which the teacher said yes. Now it's important to note that it was June and very hot, so the windows were open. So as Sam approached the end of the first row, which had the chemistry exam, he threw an exam out the window onto the street, where my helpful dad just happened to wait with Sam's chemistry notes. Dad picks it up and answers all the questions on a blank piece of paper. Now when Sam was done with his French exam, he asked the teacher if he could go take a piss, seeing as he had handed in his French but hadn't gotten his chemistry exam. Yet the teacher obliged and let him leave the classroom. Now my dad is waiting at the toilets to just hand him the piece of paper with the answer on, and all was good. He just wrote the answers on his cheat paper on his actual exam papers and handed it in. Never got caught. Also, my dad was kinda the Sam's guardian, and it still amazes me that my dad told me this story. I taught kindergarten. I teach another grade now, and between 5 to 6 is a really interesting age. There's a cognitive development that occurs between 5 to 7 where children become much more aware of the perspective of others and therefore learn how to deceive their peers. I could always tell when a student was a little ahead of the curve when they would cheat during games or activities. I caught one student during a math game deal out all of the low number cards to his peer while he kept all of the high number cards. He kept winning every single round. I walked around the classroom and stopped to watch these 2 students. The student who was dealt the low cards had no awareness that he had been dealt a shitty hand and was happily playing, while the other student won every round and was cheering. I had to stop the game to scold the student who was cheating, but in the back of my head I was just impressed that he was smart enough to cheat. I'm not a teacher, but I guess I'm semi-creative cheater. When it comes to classes I don't give a shit about. I'm on mobile, so sorry for formatting. I think my best cheat was back when I was an undergrad. I had to take history with the strictest grading professor I've ever had. Our final was an essay where we had to answer what was the underlying cause of the Civil War. The answer is slavery BTW. He gave us the question on the first day of class, so I had a lot of preparation. I spent a month writing the best essay that I could on my computer. The week before I dumbed it down a bit, considering the essay was no notes, all memory. If I had left it the way it was, I'm sure he would have known something was up, because this essay was perfect. The night before I spent 6 hours imprinting my essay into the blue book. I did this by putting a piece of paper over the blue book page and writing as hard as I could, leaving only the indentation of the words. If you flipped through the book it looked blank, brand new. But if you looked at it from a certain angle you could read my whole essay word for word. Final exam day came and all I had to do was write over the imprinted words. It took up the whole 2 hours we had, and I ended up getting a 395 over 400 on it. This was something I did. I was in credit recovery for app physics because I failed, and it was all computer based, so we sat in a lab and just worked on questions through a program. The questions were insanely hard, and I was too lazy to learn it, so I devoted my first 3 weeks to figuring out how to cheat. Here's how I did it. When you got a question wrong, it would bring you to another page saying you got it wrong, and then would give you a new question. I noticed that on the wrong answer page, you could find the correct answer in the inspect element sidebar if you went digging, but you couldn't go back and try the same question. I would unplug the Ethernet cable to the PC, plug the wrong answer, and since it wasn't loading a new web page, only showing an extension of the original page, it would bring up the wrong answer page. Open inspect element, write down the correct answer, then click for the next question. It wouldn't load because it was a fresh web page, so then I'd plug the Ethernet back in and it would reload the original question. Rinse and repeat for 6 weeks. Edit, grammar. Someone at my college was taking a psychology exam, and he convinced the professors to let him listen to music while taking it. It was the same music he had listened to while studying, and the psych material we were being tested on was partially about how sensory input, like music, can help you recall past experiences, like studying. Impressed with his practical application of the study material, the professors agreed. They checked his portable CD player and verified his CD was store-bought and everything seemed fine. Once the test started, he switched his CD player to the radio and a friend started broadcasting the test answers from the parking lot using a short-range radio transmitter. He probably would have gotten away with it if another professor hadn't been driving to work at the time and came across an unfamiliar radio frequency broadcasting question 1, A, question 2, C. Edit, a word. My high school history teacher gave his first test, 50 multiple choice questions, collected it and then handed the tests back to us the next day for us to grade as he called out the answers. I changed 2 of my answers. Later that day he came by afternoon class and presented me with a photocopy of my original answer sheet and my changed, graded sheet and asked me to explain the discrepancies. Busted. I admitted to changing it because I had felt those 2 questions were ones that the real answer was my second choice, and so gave myself a break. Luckily I hadn't tried to change all my answers to correct. Had a long talk about honesty, and I got off with a warning and my actual grade. Never tried to cheat in his class again. In college Asian humanities, I was having a really impossible time remembering Asian names/dynasties and their years. I had an exam I had to get an A on to pass the class. I had to take the exam in the testing center, cameras, and monitors at every desk to catch cheating, and I happened to get a copy of the exam from a friend that had completed it. Just memorizing wasn't working because it was a lot of Asian names and places that I just could not for the life of me remember. And even though it was multiple choice, it was a 50 question test. So, on the way to the test I had an idea. I stopped at Walmart and bought a box of little colored beads and a thing of string. I sat in the parking lot and made a cheating bracelet. A equals aqua, B equals blue, C equals copper, D equals dark purple, and put a clear decorative bead at the beginning/end to show where to start. It was actually a pretty bracelet. I finished it there in the parking lot in less than 3 minutes, put it in my wrist, and wore it in the test. Each side of my wrist showed about 1/3 of the answers, so I only had to move a little or pretend to fiddle with it once or twice over the hour to see the rest. It was amazing. I purposely missed a couple hard ones to throw off the scent. No one ever knew, and I magically passed that class. I'm not a teacher, however during my 8th grade year I had dated this guy whose mother taught in our 7th grade English department. We have an online school board with all our classes called Canvas. You can put assignments, messages, notes, tests, and pretty much anything else school related on there. Since there was a test function, most teachers use this, so they didn't have to print out a million copies and hand grade each and every one of them. My boyfriend's mom, I'll call her Ms. N, had a vocab quiz planned for her advanced placement students on Canvas. The advantage with Canvas is it doesn't put your computer on lock, so you can still look at other tabs and such. They did the test and scores came out unusually high. The downside to cheating with Canvas is you always got caught because teachers have the advantage of when grading them, they can see whether you left the tab when you did and how many times you did. In the end she ended up finding out that around 80% of her students had cheated on the test. I remember hearing about it on the bus that day, and while I was planning on heading over to their house to chill with my boyfriend a bit, I ended up comforting her while she broke down to me about not knowing what to do and how she feels like a horrible teacher because her students don't know the material. It was honestly so saddening because she is the sweetest, most amazing teacher ever. Really a true blessing to our school. Pretty much the entirety of the 8th grade class at the time was super mad at just about everybody in the 7th grade class for doing this to such an amazing teacher. It really was something. I'm a student and I learned a lot of ways on how to cheat, but I think the most creative one that I've done was cheating through hand/sound signal. My ex and I used to study together for a particular subject. So what we did was we usually split the topics into two, one part for him and the latter is for me, because we had a professor who uses PowerPoint for the questions and usually has multiple choices. Then during the examination day, the strategy is I will do the hand signal and he will do the sound, so I always sit in front of him. Hand signals are A index finger, B middle finger, C ring finger, D pinky. So basically I would lift a finger equal to those letters just pretending to scratch my head/temple or touching my face. Sound signals are A1 sound, B2 sounds, C3 sounds, D4 sounds. Example of it is ticking a pen twice means the answer is B. If he coughed thrice, answer is C. We came up to this because it was impossible to cheat on the subject because the professor was very strict and gives an automatic grade if he caught you cheating. And also we were desperate because the professor is known for failing half of its class. Until now I can still remember the adrenaline rush that I felt during those examination days. I felt like someone was twisting my gut because I was too nervous to get caught, but at the same time I was having fun. 10/10ths would recommend this strategy, haha. This is the exact opposite. I knew a guy in college that got the question/answers to a physics test somehow. Never would say, but I'm 99% sure he was fucking the grad assistant. He wasn't an idiot, but was psyched to have the test. Offered it to me and one other guy. I was doing fine in the class and understood the material, so I passed on the offer. Anyway, he got so worried about getting caught if he did too well and or the test being changed, he quite literally spent 1.5 weeks studying every day to not only memorize the questions and answers, but also learning the material. It was bizarre. The test was the same, but he purposely got a B to avoid it being obvious. He knew the stuff so well that had the test been totally different he would have easily achieved an A. He knew the material as well as I did, and I got in the mid-90s. The human mind is so damn bizarre. TLDR, dude got test key, but purposefully sandbagged his grade to be worse than if he had just taken the exam without cheating. Rubber band man. In my high school Latin class, an oversized football player, aka man, seemed to always ace the vocabulary tests. He was not so good at conjugating or sentence structure, but had a fail-proof mental recall system, so we thought. In fact, every class we had together, I noticed his ability to answer AB-type inquiries was nothing short of phenomenal. Even his mathematical formulas were always spot on. His actual calculations, not so much. Tutoring the man for a Latin final exam, he had no intentions or need on studying any of the vocabulary words, definitions, tenses, etc. He only had concern for descriptive, conjugative, structure and exploratory type test questions. I said to him, "I'm just wondering." Then asked, "How can you flawlessly recite and recall vocabulary and formulas on point like you do, but yet can't remember, for the life of you, how to put it all together?" He said to me, "Rubber band, man." I said, what? Then he proceeded to take the rubber band off his wrist. He stretched it out and placed it around a notebook long ways. As the rubber band stretched out, you can see all of the answers to each vocabulary word. It included gender variations, prefixes, suffixes, tenses, etc. Then when he took the rubber band off of the notebook and it retracted to its original size, all those answers began to disappear. I had no idea how much information a simple rubber band could actually hold. Not a teacher, but there was a good bit of cheating at my fancy college prep high school. Shit was hard. One class, me and a bunch of the football guys plus a couple of cool smart kids would literally pass around a Nautica during tests, and you'd fill in the answers you knew. Teacher was old and super oblivious, so he never caught on at all. Mostly though, me and the other girls would write answers/notes on our thighs before leaving for school. We wore dark tights, so you couldn't see the writing at all unless you pulled the fabric. Once had a teacher accidentally staple the answer key to the back of an exam. Halfway through, one kid told him, "I've never seen a whole class so pissed at one guy." Had a bitch of a test once. It was basically just a giant in-class essay, which would be fine, except it was biology. She gave us the prompt beforehand to study, so I wrote out my entire essay before the test and memorized it word for word, like 5 pages. Got an A. There was also a lot of writing on water bottle labels, writing on the cover of calculators, etc., but most of those methods were outlawed pretty quickly. I had a project due that made up a significant portion of my grade, due towards the end of the semester, to be submitted via email. Teacher had a strict "I do not accept late work. If you are 1 second late, you get a 0 policy." I missed the deadline in getting it put in, but the next week in class I approached the professor demanding an explanation for the 0 I received. They explained to me that I had not submitted the assignment, and I argued, lied, that I had, and could prove it. Once class was out, I went to my work computer, worked on campus, and pulled out the network cable. Once it was out, I changed the system clock to alter the date on the system. First I opened the project to make sure that the last time it was shown as being edited was a date before it was due. Then I opened up Outlook and composed the email to submit the project and hit send. It went to my outbox with the spoof date and time on it. Then I took screenshots, including the email and the date sent recorded on the email. I then deleted the email to make sure it never actually sent. Sent the professor the screenshots along with the project and explained that I must have been the victim of some technical error. He accepted the assignment